Hi, Paul. Your Garden of Eden interpretation really shifted my view of that story. If Eden was a lab, not a paradise, what does that do to our whole theological framework around sin and salvation?
That's a great question because I think many of our doctrines about sin and salvation are based on a particular reading of the Eden story, in particular in Genesis 3. So the Calvinist and Augustinian doctrines of the total depravity of humanity, the universal sinfulness of humanity, they're really built on that story. But as I show in the Eden series, the sin aspect of that story is really just in the top layer. It is in the retelling of an Elohim story that the sin story has been layered on top. And I show that the story of the snake and Yahweh and the man and the woman and the fruit in the garden in Genesis 3 is really a retelling of the story of the struggle between Enlil and Enki in the Babylonian story of origins. They were the original players who conflicted over how intelligent human beings should be, how healthy, how long-lived, how many of them there should be, all the punishments of struggling to get enough food to eat and then struggling in childbirth. They are all there in the Babylonian story. And when we go to the original, sin and salvation they're not part of that story at all. The moral behavior that we find in the original texts is the moral behavior of the Anunnaki. It's the morality of Enlil and Enki that is really in question in that story. And it's only the retelling of the story by a later Yahwist writer that it becomes a story about human sinfulness and salvation. And it's sort of pasted over the top as a gloss over the earlier story. I think it's really important to dismantle those Augustinian and Calvinist doctrines because they're not even good theology based on the current form of Genesis 3, if you read it closely enough. But as soon as you realize that the original version of this story is about paleocontact, you realize, oh, okay, human sinfulness had nothing to do with the dramas being described and reflected on in this text. So yes, I think it changes everything.
Paul Wallis is an internationally best-selling author, researcher, and scholar of ancient mythologies. Over the last decade, Paul's work has probed the world's mythologies and ancestral narratives for the insights they hold on our origins as a species and our potential as human beings. As a senior churchman, Paul served as a church doctor, a theological educator, and an archdeacon in the Anglican Church in Australia. Paul's work in church ministry has included training pastors in the interpretation of biblical texts. His work in biblical translation and interpretation has revealed a forgotten layer of ancient story, with far-reaching implications for our understanding of human origins and our place in the cosmos.